lovely.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this first event at this year's Charleston Festival, fittingly opened by one of our most popular and most multifaceted cultural personalities, Joanna Lumley. I feel we should have a ribbon to cut or a bottle of champagne to crack. Both, maybe. Now, everyone obviously would like Joanna Lumley to head up their parade. Doughty fighter for the Gurkhas in Tibet, the one who strikes fear into cabinet ministers' hearts, model, actress, former Bond girl, high-kicking Purdey, fag-chuffing, au contraire, fag-chuffing Patsy, documentary presenter, winner of 3 BAFTA awards, human rights campaigner, and tireless worker for a huge number of charities. OBE, the one who is indisputably absolutely fabulous. Now, I use the word fittingly at the beginning, advisedly, as we're very grateful to our sponsors for this session, Darcy Sussex Boutiques, for sponsoring this event, a perfect convergence of the twain, a local fashion destination and a celebrated fashion icon.
Thank you so much.
So I'd just like to introduce our chair for these proceedings. Joanna Lumley famously has more than one string to her bow, so it's appropriate that Charleston's Renaissance man and restorer of violins, director Colin McKenzie, should be chairing her event. Prior to heading up Charleston, he served his apprenticeship at the more modest National Gallery. When he's not fighting Charleston's corner in the arts world jungle and fundraising for our grand centenary projet, he can be found at his workbench or just beforehand in the Charleston office collecting parts for his vintage cars. But of course, the really important link that qualifies him to interview Joanna Lumley is that he's Charleston's very own fashionista. Colin.
I think that's probably the first time I've ever been called a fashionista, but it's very, very nice. The first thing I wanted to say, we're delighted to have Joanna here, was how much I enjoyed this book, which you've all got a chance to buy at the end, but it is the most wonderful book. I studied art history, and I was always teased by my friends that as an art historian I was incapable of reading a book that didn't have lots of pictures in. So actually, getting this, it's been wonderful. It's been such a treat. It's a beautifully produced book and wonderful images. And there are glorious photographs, as you'll see, from all parts of your life and career, and from your parents, from your grandparents, and I do urge you to look at it. But one thing I wanted to ask to start with was just, is it a bit strange having your family album so publicly on display? How do you feel about that?
Well, the funny thing is, this is about the third. I'm going to start shuffling about here because I am a bit of a stage manager. I'm anxious that I don't want to have my back to you. So if I do, please feel it is my finest bit of back. I'd had 3, this is my third go at doing an autobiography. And the first 2 were books which were illustrated by photographs. And I suddenly thought, why don't I have a book of photographs illustrated with words? Which seems to me a fascinating way around it, because actually, you know, a picture tells 1,000 words, and describing something can quite often be shown, or indeed a picture will bring to mind memories that if I was just writing in a kind of, you know, sort of linear way, I might have forgotten. So I opened the cupboards. Now, my mama, and we're all now probably mothers and grandmothers and aunts and God knows what, likes to keep things. And as her little girl, when I was a model, she stored up countless photographs. My first humble parts in plays, she kept programmes and notices and things like this. And she kept things that I never would have done. Because when we were modelling in the 60s, it was considered terribly poor show to look at the photographs that you'd actually appeared in. So you never bought the magazine, and you never looked at it, and you never referred to it again. It was a sort of grand bit of behaviour, rather ridiculous. And sometimes very difficult when you'd managed to do your one and only photo shoot for Vogue, and you had to appear to be so dismissive of the whole thing, you didn't even bother to look at it. Anyway, luckily, Mummy had kept the photographs in suitcases and boxes and files and folders and carrier bags, and they joined, because I have been alive forever, my collection of photographs of all the other things I'd been doing. And it seemed, when we spread them out over the floor of the dining room and then of the kitchen and then up the stairs and then into the drawing room and then up in the bedroom and up through 5 stories of the house, that there was enough pictures to be going on with. So we started off as the whole thing as my life in pictures. Then I thought, wouldn't it be fun to be given a book where you really didn't have to sit down and wade through it? So I thought that all the pictures really would have extended captions, and that's what I've sort of tried to do. So the second you can begin to feel your concentration fading, turn the page.
But you said that it was your mother who kept all these things. I suspect that you're quite a hoarder as well. Am I right?
Look, OK, I don't know. Yes, look, I have hoarded things all my life. I love things for the same reason that we all love things. You feel sentimentally attached. You feel that it would be amusing for your, when I was starting this book, little granddaughters, which I've actually got a spider on my hair now. If I do this, it's because I have got the Charleston spider here. Luckily, my mother taught me to adore spiders, snakes, and snails and slugs. So I love them. So that was just a bit of a Charleston blessing. So I've kept things because I love them. I keep clothes, I keep books, I keep photographs, I keep postcards from people, I keep old letters. I keep things that I think are interesting, which make in my long museum curator mind a story that can be put together. I didn't know that this book was going to be the story, that everything I had collected, whether it was old dolls or bits and pieces, could all be photographed and put together into this book. So when I fall down dead tomorrow, you can go, well, good old Bat. Do you know what I mean? She's stitched it up and she's put it in a book. But secretly, I think what I'm trying to tell you is you've all got this book in you. All of us have got this book in us. And as books may be, and I don't think they are, on a bit of the kind of, ooh, will books exist? Make a collection of your things. We've all our telephones have got cameras. Take snapshots of things. Put together your own life in bits. Do it. I can't tell you how fascinating it is. And most people want to write down something for their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren, because our lives will never come again. And believe me, at the pace that we've all lived through already, the changes we've already seen, can you imagine what's going to happen in the next 40 years? So do it. That's the end of my instruction.
So what will happen to all of this? Will it become like Charleston, that you'll actually, there'll be boxes and drawers full of things that after you're gone...
I don't know. Isn't it funny how you feel when somebody's writing is on a page? Somebody you once loved, or a parent, or a school friend. So much of us is in our writing. Now, not in our typing, ping, and in our emailing, piff, poff, tweeting, beep. But writing, a bit of us, which is why we pay squillions for an autograph of Mozart or Elvis Presley or whoever it is, that person touched that pen, that ink, the extraordinary magic that endures over the ages of somebody who wrote that word, which is quite often when people come to us and say, will you write my name? Because when I've got somebody, we were talking just before we came on, Stephen Spender wrote my name in a book of his. Well, he wrote my name. So in some way we've stepped up to the table of the great people. The people, Stephen Spender knows my name. He wrote my name, It's an extraordinary link. So what do you do with all the letters that people wrote to you or things that people gave to you? They wrapped it, they loved it, they gave it to you. So I keep them. Okay, I keep them.
Well, perhaps we'll come back to that. It's fair to say you've been rather successful as a model, and of course, with Patsy and Absolutely Fabulous, your relationship with fashion continues. But when did you realise, first of all, that clothes were important to you?
They've never been important to me. Look, this is what happened. I left school. I came from a family, not dysfunctional, adoring, but books were our family. They had books on the table, at lunchtime, at breakfast time. People read all the time. You read in the evenings. We didn't have television sets and holidays. You read. You made up things. You wrote essays. my parents, who were brought up and born in India and lived that sort of life, my father was an army officer, we didn't know what jobs were. Now, it didn't mean we didn't have money, but we didn't know what working was. Because if you were an army officer's wife in Hong Kong, you didn't get a job. You lived where the army quarters were in Hong Kong, or in Malaya, or in Dehradun, or wherever you were. So the whole notion of how you get a job completely escaped my parents. So the idea of leaving school and getting a job, they felt the nuns would take care of that. Now, the nuns were blue-stocking women, not very far away on the coast, and the community, who I simply adored, has now died out, because they were Anglican nuns, and there's a very small call for Anglican nuns now. I love them dearly. But anyway, they've dwindled from 43 to 4 to none at all. And they didn't know how to get jobs either, because they were nuns. And they were blue-stocking nuns. They were a teaching order, so all they cared about was books and things. So I left school and came up to London and thought, well, what do I do now? And went along with my beloved aunt, who also believed in reading and strange, bringing people in off the street to have lunch. Quite eccentric. She said, I'll take you to them. I know somebody who runs J. Walter Thompson. It's an advertising agency. We'll go to see the man who runs it. So we went into his chairman's office, and he said, hello, what can I do for you? And I was 18. He said, and why are you here? And I said, I spoke a little bit differently. I said, hello, I've come to get a job, I hope. And he said, and what qualifications do you have, and what sort of training do you have? And I said, nothing, but I could help. And I was shown the door so fast, and I realised I had no qualifications. I had nothing. I'd done A-levels and stuff, but everybody, and you must tell this to your grandchildren. Okay, last instruction. You must tell your children and grandchildren exams are of no importance at all. Anyway, I realised that I had no qualifications for being a working person. And at the time, in the 60s, in the swinging 60s, and I think some of us here can remember those odd, rather heady times when, if you were fairly lumpen but weren't actually diseased and had 4 limbs, you could usually be a model, which was sort of the lowest of the low, because the Christine Keeler, do you remember that great extraordinary scandal? That was still rippling through, and she'd called herself a model. And so when my father heard it, he fell into his boiled egg that I was going to be a model, because, clearly that was things that people did in London at the time. And he could be, my mother could pacify him, beat him down, give him another book to read, and he'd quieten down. And so I became a model in the times when you just went to Lucy Clayton for 1 month of mornings only, learning how to walk. A dab of blue eyeshadow. It was called street makeup in those days. Sounds awful now, but a little blush of pink on the lips, a little bit of blue there, touch of mascara. But this was the time of Mary Quant. So I was putting on eyelashes in bunches, clumps of them. Like you couldn't see me. I looked like a kind of box hedge walking about with this clump of stuff there. We'd reeled all our skirts over so our knees showed. I dyed my hair maroon because I thought it would look so cool. And anyway, so 1 month of Lucy Clayton and you're smack into the world of photography. What a life! What a life. Everybody needed models. We all looked like puddings, but who cared? We sort of did okay. I was so poor I didn't even have a hairdryer, and I was a model. Anyway, we wore our hair in great big rollers. It was considered incredibly chic. You put your hair in rollers. Yeah, put my hair in rollers. And then you put a scarf over the top of it. You glued on your false fingernails, another set of false eyelashes, top, another set on the bottom, another set. Completely white mouth. Why? Ink black panda eyes, white mouth, high-heeled boots, and pan stick. Do you remember pan stick, ladies? Yeah, we remember it. And off we went with our big model bag, woman's own nylon jerseys. Anyway, why did we
One of the wonderful things in the book is the one of the modelling types you described. I loved. You described having to be able to do in the 60s was person laughing at fruit. Is that something you could do for us now?
No, it's something I invented. I mean, these are very pathetic because modelling made me laugh till I cried, and not when I was doing it, but it did honestly strike me as pretty absurd because we were acting characters. You would arrive, you had to do all your own makeup, you had to do all your own hair. You had to do all your own accessorising, which means second-guessing the kind of jewellery, gloves, shoes, boots, polar necks, underwear, bras, smooth or push-up. I didn't mean to look at you, sir, when I said that. I don't know why I looked at you. I didn't mean to. Anyway, we'd lumber all this stuff along, and you then had to be smart secretary wearing brown nylon top, And then you had to be young mum laughing with a baby. And then you had to be gawky office girl looking at a piece of fruit. So you invented all these ridiculous looks and ways of being to make the camera feel you... Oh, and the wigs were going on, black, yellow, curly red, thing. And so you're doing this in bunches and freckles painted on. You just did the job of a million people. And so I worked... Well, I haven't got any fruit, but I could be laughing at a banana. And you were always gasping with amazement at things just off camera going, oh, like this pointing. And sometimes groups of you, one would laugh. If the clothes were really bad, you had to be much more vigorous about it because people's eyes would then be distracted by the model laughing in the picture. And so if the clothes were frightful, three of you would go... which was to show your girls having fun. I'm pleased to see it sort of melted in, because there are quite a lot of pictures of girls, now they do it with leg waxing. I didn't mean to look at you either, sir, when I said that either. They do leg waxing commercials, and lots of groups of girls waxing their leg. Why? Poor girls. So pretty. They should be out with boys, not sitting in and waxing their legs. Anyway, this was part of my life for 3 whole years, laughing, simpering, changing my wigs, painting my nails, but honestly, it's not what I wanted to do. Because since I was 7, I wanted to be an actress. Now, from St Mary's School, Baldslow, St Leonards-on-Sea, Sussex, I went up to RADA when I was 16 to do an audition to get into RADA. We were such a closeted school. You were sacked if you smoked cigarettes or spoke to boys, so we were pretty cut off from the real world. And as I spoke a little bit more like that in those days, I decided to do, from Jean and Oui, I decided to do a piece from the Skylark about Joan of Arc. And I decided that I'd do the scene where she'd been locked up by the Dauphin. And so I walked on stage, I walked onto this frightening, sick-making, even now when I go down Gower Street and I see the nightmare Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Anyway... got into this darkened theatre where there's nobody but 2 people sitting down there. They said, yes. And I said, hello, Joanna, yes. And I said, I'm doing a piece from the Skylark. And they said, yes. I said, imagine this is a prison cell. They said, we can imagine it, get on. I went, oh, Dauphin, I wish I wasn't locked up here. How I long to be. And they said, next. And I went, oh, no. Oh, no! In my heart, I felt like Joan of Arc, but what was coming out was all strange and not like me at all. Now, so I failed to get into RADA, and I thought, if I fail to get into RADA, what if I try for another one and they fail me there? And what if more than one person says, you can't be an actress? I'll have to give up acting before I've even started. So I thought, well, I won't do that. I won't go to drama school, which is why I did modelling. 3 years of modelling, and I thought, but I'm not an actress yet, what do I do? Richard Johnson, does anybody remember him? He was a contemporary of Richard Burton, and it was the big debate, which of those 2 boys was going to be the new Olivier? Fabulous looking. He was doing a film, long forgotten, about, there was a sub-James Bond, which was Bulldog Drummond. I met him at a party. I said, I didn't say hello, because I've been a model now, so I went, hello. I very much want to be an actress, and I don't know how to do it because I'm a model. And in those days, to be a model and to go into acting was the lowest, the worst, the scummiest thing you could ever have done. You were really looked down on. He said, I'm doing a film. If I give you one line to say in this film, you will be given an equity card. If you have an equity card, you can work. You can't get an equity card without going on tour for 42 weeks. And you can't get an equity card if you haven't been to drama school. But I'll get you that. So I went on stage, onto the film set down at Pinewood, trembling like a leaf. Nobody knew it, because that was revealed later in the film, but I was a robot with bolts through my neck, but unfortunately... So the slightly wooden performance I gave was meant to be, but nobody would have known that. And I was summoned into a man's office, Jimbo, James Villas, who I remember so well to this day, said, yes, not quite Miss Moneypenny, yes, Miss Phillips, what can I do for you? Can I do something, and can you do that? Yes. And he turned to me and said, and now you, Agent 03, or whatever it was, I'd like you to deal with the water cooler. And I said, yes, Mr. Robinson. And I had my equity card. Yes, Mr. Robinson.
I like the way in the book you described yourself as a sort of rather like Zelig, which is a character from a Woody Allen film that probably everyone knows, because you pop up in unexpected places throughout the 60s. I mean, you appear in General Hospital, you're the love interest in Coronation Street, the whole series of you're a Bond girl, you carry on turning up in different places.
I was Dracula's last victim. Gracefully, Peter Cushing, what could be better? I'm playing Peter Cushing's granddaughter, Jessica Van Helsing. Gracefully is Dracula, the only Dracula there will ever be. And I'm in the last film they ever make together. And it is fabulous. I have my hair dyed red. I have dyed my hair every colour possible known to man. Even to the Charleston painters, my hair would have been a bit of a sort of... I've had it green and yellow, I've had it white, I've had it beige, mousy, I've had it striped black. Anyway, this one, it was red. And I was Jessica Van Helsing with red hair who fought with nightmare, sort of fanged vampire women necessarily chained to their coffins in the cellar. That's where you keep them. Jessica opens the door, has a bit of a fight, loses the fight, pinned out on the table in a white dress. Dracula comes to bite her neck. Why have I turned into this voice? Anyway... The house blows up and she's saved. So I just wanted to tell you that. I was chosen to be Dracula's bride in darkness forever. So I was there, I was a Bond girl, I was this. Ken Barlow said, marry me. And in the script it said no. I said, oh, I'd give anything to be in Coronation Street for more than 8 episodes. They said, you leave. So I said, no, as it said. Most hated woman in Britain for 1 week. She turned down Ken Barlow, how could she? And it wasn't until I was 30... that I got any money in my pocket at all. I mean, we were skint in those days. I sometimes look at what people think skint is nowadays. Were we just able to get by on less? Were our expectations so much lower? Because we lived, if you had nothing to eat, you ate a bit of bread with Marmite on it, and that was it. That was supper. That's all. You didn't have a television, you couldn't afford one. If you didn't have a heat in the winter, you put on 10 layers of clothes and looked fat. I mean, you just were poorer. But it wasn't a deal. It wasn't a big deal. You always rented because you could never afford to buy. You went on the tube quite necessarily because it's a simple way of travelling.
Was there a role that you wanted to get but you didn't get in the...
No. I've no ambition at all. It's the only ambition... Now, OK, I lied easily there because it's the beginning of the festival. You'll hear many more liars.
Because you always wanted to be a Frenchwoman as well, didn't you?
I wanted to be a Frenchwoman, but the truth is I had one ambition when it came up, which was that they would suddenly decided to do the Avengers again. And I thought, but that's my part. And 270 girls went through the doors, and they didn't like them. I went through the first time, and they said, no, we've seen you on Coronations, you're not really what we're looking for. And I did the only time I've ever done this before, and I actually won't do it again, because although it worked then, don't do a trick twice. I went to the door, I slammed it shut with my heel, and I stood against the door like that, and I said, test me! Give me a screen test! They were so revolted and shocked by this behaviour that they gave me a screen test, and then another, and then another, and then I got the part of Purdey. And then my life changed forever. Then that was the last time I ever had to explain who I was or what I did. It didn't matter that people didn't like you. They knew who you were. Equity card, know your name. Luck.
Aside from working with just about everyone who's anyone in the world of theatre, in the world of television, cinema, you've been able to meet people of real global significance, like the Dalai Lama, Nelson Mandela. Has there been anyone that you would have really liked to meet that you didn't have the chance to?
Well, obviously Elvis. I mean, there's literally not a person on the planet who just doesn't believe that they could, if they'd met Elvis, A, have stopped his untimely death, and B, possibly been a friend, and some girls maybe a little bit more. But we could have, Elvis would have loved me. He would have loved me. I knew that. And so I'm so sorry I never met him. There are all kinds of other extraordinary people. Bill Clinton. Oh, let me tell you. Can I just say something about power? When you're in power and not in power, because I've met Clinton both when he was President of the United States at about his most powerful, when the Ireland question was being sorted, and he came over here. John Major was our Prime Minister. Huge reception at Downing Street, after which he was going to go to Belfast, he was going to go to Dublin, he was wrapping up the Irish problem. Now, Clinton is an extremely attractive, tall, good-looking American man. By the time he was president and the most powerful man on earth, he had grown to about 6'10". I mean it. He was like a lighthouse. He's got a good-looking face with blue eyes. He radiated power. And when he looked round at you with a sort of benevolent, amused, slightly leery smile, you were shell-shocked and mesmerised. You were caught in his glare, in the beam. He absolutely bewitched you. I met him when he was no longer president, and he was an American man whose name I knew, who was courteous, but power is so attractive. Rock stars at the height of their power, people crush themselves to death and stand outside in the rain with no clothes all night. The second they're over a bit, they've gone. So we're all like flowers blooming in the garden. We come and go, we come and go. Only if it matters to you does it hurt. If it doesn't matter, who cares? You know what I mean? Lots of lipstick, darling. And another glass of champagne. What could be nicer?
You've devoted yourself very publicly and very, very successfully to a large number of good causes, most recently the Gurkhas and working with Marks and Spencer's and Oxfam. But have you always wanted to make a difference? Have you always wanted to help others? Where does it come from?
Well, Colin, I mean, I think the thing is this is the way I was brought up. It was not only in my family's background, who made perfectly clear to us from as soon as we could understand the difference between egg and toast, was that our lives here are simply in service of other people. That's the whole point of it. That's the only point of being alive, is to do things for other people. Then I went to a convent where Mummy actually had only... We went to the convent for two reasons. One, that Mummy wrongly thought that we would be taught... I'm just going to arrange the table. Mummy wrongly thought we'd be taught beautiful needlework, which she couldn't do at all, and thought this would be a very good skill to have. Unfortunately, our nuns couldn't sew. And also because when Daddy went to meet the nuns, who was a bit of fearful, as most men are, of meeting completely... you know, in hijab, actually, as they were, only their sweet little faces showing. Sister Lizzie was late because she'd been listening to the cricket scores. Oh, that was the school for us, said Daddy. That sounds smashing. What you asked me at the beginning of the question, I did have an answer to it. Please
No, absolutely. No. Have you always wanted to make a difference?
Yes.
And where's
so the nuns' only purpose in life was to make a difference and to serve other people. So it seemed completely normal. Always pick up litter, always try to mend it, always help out, always volunteer. It was not a do-goody thing. It was simply a thing. It was simply the only way life can be lived. So it's always struck me as a bit odd that it's now seen as a kind of different slice or a different kind of person, people who do good. Well, the only point that we're here and the only reason we do things, the only reason we love people and give them presents or dress nicely or keep on time or write thank you letters is, in a funny way, doing... And the reason this country is so spectacular, and I've been lucky enough to be peripheral in some of these enormous funds to raise money, this country gives like a kicking horse to things like comic relief or sport aid or children in need, whatever it is. We empty our pockets, and thank God we do. We don't say, oh, they should have thought of that earlier. I think that we are wise virgins, and I think that we do, unlike bad Bible story, we don't lock them out, we give to the foolish virgins. Sometimes we drum our fingers a little, say they were foolish virgins. However, just this once, here's another £half-crown.
We've talked about a love of books and the fact that there are always books at home, and you clearly love language and use it often to devastating effect. I don't think any of us who saw you with a certain government minister will forget that. It's rather wonderful. I'm sure it's on YouTube as well. But how important is reading to you? Do you always have a book on the go? Are you always...
Oh, well, I mean, I think like many people in this room, I have many books on the go, and it depends on how tired you are or where you are in your life, to what particular book you read simultaneously. Some books grab you and you can't. You open it and you meet, half an hour later you just you can't stop. Other ones you savour and you go, ooh, this day's been a bit of a bummer, but I've got the book. And quite often an avocado pear, I find, is a very agreeable reward at the end of the day. But a very good book waiting beside you on the bedside table, and preferably 2 or 3. And because I do a lot of stuff, I have to have a lot of stuff I have to read. So there's research books, which is when you're absolutely firing on all cylinders and you can take it in and you can feel your mind. I can feel my mind like plasticine. I know when I'm learning because it's completely effortless. I don't have to hear anything. It's going straight in because I want to know it and it's gone in. Other times it's a little bit of a slog, but you can usually paraphrase it. Some books are paradise to read. Some need a little bit of work. I thought I would die on my desert island where I had nothing to read. I had 9 days of no music, no reading. I thought I would die. But the funny thing is we've all read so much that we've got it all inside us, so it all comes bubbling up. So all the music comes bubbling up, and all the poetry comes up, and all the stuff you've read, books come to the top of your mind. So this is this is the very last instruction I'm going to give. For you to pass on, not for you, which is to try to get young people not to have stuff coming in all the time, not to be plugged in and not to be listening and not to be connected, because you can't think when stuff's coming in. You have to have emptiness. You have to have space. You must have that. It doesn't matter if you're a writer or a thinker or a developer or a creator. You have to have space to have your own thoughts and your own beings. Otherwise, you simply become a pattern, a cipher of whatever they want you to have, know, buy, be. Don't be that. So please tell your young ones, if necessary, tear those things out of their ears. Confiscate their things.
Last year you wrote the introduction to this, which I'm sure all of you, but Bloomsbury audience will know, which is Vita Sackville-West's All Passion Spent. Yeah. It's a wonderful introduction, but it's a fabulous book if you haven't read it. But it deals with old age, and there is a wonderful description. The principal character is Lady Slane. It was written by Vita Sackville-West when I think was in her late 30s, about a woman who is in her late 80s. And I just wanted, because you say some rather interesting things here about growing old and about Lady Slane sort of growing old, and I think you rather admired her, the way that she...
It's so odd, because I'm 66 now, and yet, like everybody, I now know this to be a case. We all are at a particular age somehow. I don't know how we got to whatever age it is that we think we are. Mine's somewhere in mid-20s, but part of it's still only 12. I haven't changed much since then. Maybe late 20s. But I'm clearly, quite apparently, 66, and will soon be 86, or 106 if I live that long, or dead. So there's no reason. Who are we, and when are we who we are? Do we really keep changing that much? We can ameliorate our behaviour or our attitude slightly. We can certainly learn more. I hope we can become opener and freer to new ideas. But I think we are just who we are, and I don't care about growing old, except that I feel happier, except that I'm not afraid that I might wear the wrong clothes or not look nice enough, because I'm not paid for looking nice anymore. That was my job when I was a model, so it mattered. If you're a little bit fat, if you're a little bit spotty, a little bit... Oh, my God, what should I do? If you've got a spot, you've got a spot. Oh, photographer would be horrible. You look like a pig. Yeah, I've got a spot. I mean, I don't have to do that now. I don't have to go there now. So all is well. So getting older is bliss. Don't you think?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. You've said that you felt you were born in a suitcase, and it seems that a lot of your life has been spent travelling. We put the suitcases here, obviously, just for you, to make you feel at home. What is it that you love so much about travelling?
Because I was born in India, and very soon I had to leave India because partition came the year after I was born. We packed and left, and then we just started a series, because my father was with the Gurkhas. We went to wherever the regiment was posted, and so you would have 6 months leave, and then you'd have 3 years somewhere or 2 years somewhere, but each time you punctuated it by going home, which didn't really mean anything, because we didn't have a home, and as my parents had been brought up abroad, and their parents, and I had to pay to become a British citizen, because my father was, who was English as can come, named Lumley, but he was born in Lahore, and I was born in Kashmir, so all these things sum you up as a sort of alien, which I love, because it's a kind of travelling tribe, and those who've been born abroad and got this lovely, slightly fleet of foot way, know the feeling of not really being rooted somewhere. Part of me longs to be rooted somewhere, but part of me is perfectly happy not to be. But I do love travelling. I get panic-stricken if I feel I'm not going to go abroad during the year, or travel during the year. So I fixed myself up a little trip. This year I managed to force ITV into thinking it was a good idea for me to go off and make an hour-and-a-half programme about finding Noah's Ark. Honestly, what's not to like? Think of it. We all know the story. We all know that probably in all the different religions and histories that there was great inundation. The world was covered with water and there was a great sense of danger and people were saved. Was it a punishment from the gods? Wherever the boats made, did they have animals 2 by 2? All this business. But in our setup, we have the rainbow as the sign of peace. The dove came bearing the olive branch, drawn by Picasso. This was the sign that God wasn't angry, so he brought the sign of peace. So I just want to follow all that through Turkey and Ararat, the obvious places where people have got rather like the true cross. This is the true ark. Here's the ark. It's a lovely ark. Look, that's where the elephants live. That's oh my goodness. And so all that. But then it takes me through to India and to Oman. So this is very good. So this is my suitcase for this year.
And are you a good travelling companion? I mean, you spent 9 days on a desert island. Do you enjoy travelling with other people, or do you like travelling alone?
Well, on the desert island, they left me alone. They would come and film me in the daytime, but then they went off to a cruise ship and left me on my little island. It was only a mile long by 3/4 of a mile wide, and it didn't have any biting snakes. It had little tiny boa constrictors, but they could only go around your ankle, little softy snakies. And it had fruit bats and turtles and things like that. Beautiful creatures. But I wasn't allowed a camera. I wasn't allowed anything. I lived like a little animal there for 9 days. I virtually had no food. I had a handful of rice every day. But I loved it. I loved it because I don't mind being alone. And I just love the whole notion of differentness, of not being too settled. Because we've got a very short time at this particular party, which is our life. And the taxis are going to be called soon. And you might as well have a good look at what's here. So that's what travelling is about. Don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'd be failing in my duty if I didn't ask you about Patsy. I'm sorry to do it, but
yes.
No. I mean, did Patsy spring fully formed, as you say in your book?
Jennifer wrote a pilot. I didn't know her. I'd never met her. I liked her work very much on French and Saunders. She wrote a pilot for this extraordinarily funny idea, which had a friend, Adina, had a friend called Patsy, but it wasn't defined in any way. She just seemed to be a friend. And we sat and read it through, a scene with the director, just Jennifer and me, and it was pretty scary, because Jennifer, who's become extremely genial now, I think I've probably trained her to be genial. She was honestly like the Sphinx. You couldn't understand. She just nothing. She would just look through you with fairly cold eyes and look down again. And I couldn't work out how to make her laugh or what this character was supposed to be. So I began to kind of mess around with it. And in the first episode, she's very, very straight. She gets a bit drunk. But then she gets hold of it, old Pats. But she sort of emerged from somewhere, the 60s. She was sort of trailer trash. She had a pretty miserable life, but she was brought up, just shunted from pillar to post, was sort of partly continental. There were a lot of them around in the 60s and 70s, you know. Those sort of, where do you go to, my lovely? Do you remember those songs? Look in my eyes, Marie-Claire. You know, there were quite a lot of this old trailer trash shipping around, looking okay, you know, blinged out of their minds. No, just sleeping on other people's floors. And I thought, that's where she is. That's who Patsy is. I love her. I love doing her. Well, look, we've got one more episode coming up for the Olympics, which we've filmed it already, and so it'll be, we hope, skidding onto your screens just the week that the Olympics start. I don't want to say too much about it, except Patsy does smoke, and the Olympic flame does come past, you know.
Why do you think she's so popular, though? Because she really has caught the imagination, hasn't
Well,
it?
the reason the show was so popular is that it's a long time. It's 21 years now since the first episode came out, which seems unbelievable. Yeah. In those days, family shows, or shows which had families in them, always ended up, no matter how bad the scrap was or how difficult the teenage children were, somehow by the end of it they go, oh, give me a hug, and everything was okay by the end of it. Now, Jennifer's extraordinary mind, aided and abetted by Ruby Wax, they're just made of knives, they're so funny. And they just would write and make these extraordinary things where the family was very, very bad indeed, a kleptomaniac grandmother. Poor little Safi. Safi was the saint of that show. Safi's the one, and lots of men adored Safi. Isn't that strange? There was something about that little timid girl with no makeup, wearing her glasses and humbly doing good things, that the men of Britain adored. The gay men of Britain, however, adored Patsy and Adina, and I can't tell you how many look-alike competitions we've judged. of boys dressed up as Patsy and Adina, which is divine. I can't tell you how many lookalikes Patsy's got who go around London looking rather better than I do. And it's just been an extraordinary thing that the public liked it because it was funny. That's all. It sent everything up. It broke all the rules. It said, oh, look, there are so many rules now. We don't care about them. I mean, I am actually a tremendously ordinary and quiet and law-abiding person. But Patsy isn't. So that was fun.
There are quite a lot of photographs in your book of cars. And am I just pursuing a sort of male fantasy here, or actually do you have rather a love affair with cars?
I used to. I loved cars. I loved the whole notion of cars. When I was a child, I didn't have a doll's house. I had a garage and collected cars. And I've got some of those cars still. And I still find, sadly, that I buy cars, quite small cars. I push boys out of the way. Get away. That's my car. Sorry. Yes, I love this dinky. Thank you so much. And I get cars. I buy them made out of flit tins in Mozambique and things like this, beautiful little funny cars. And my last car is a lovely little red London bus with They Can't Ring the Bell When They Want to Get Off, which was about compassion in world farming and pictures of sheep on it. And then the London taxi drivers gave me a little thing, and I've got a smart car, so I have to get another little car. So I keep them on a suitcase outside my bedroom. Isn't that funny? A pile of suitcases with a whole lot of cars in them. But I adored cars, and when I was very, very poor, and my darling Jamie, my baby, was very young, and I was unmarried, and we didn't have much to go on, and life was pretty slim, and I couldn't get a job. And my aunt, the one who invites people in off the street for lunch, was there with me having tea, which was probably a second-time used tea bag. It was pretty small, slim pickings. And a knock on the door, and a man from downstairs, who was clearly a villain, we knew he was a villain anyway, I think he was called Villain Roger or something like that, said, Joanna, just to tell you, I've got a Rolls Royce outside. Do you want to buy it? And I said, oh, well, of course. And I looked out the window. I said, it's lovely. How much do you want? And he said, $5.50. I said, certainly. Aunt, have you got any money? Because I've got none. She said, oh, darling, well, nor have I, but let's write cheques. So we both wrote cheques. She wrote one for £350 and I wrote one for £200, which, put me back into the red for another 3 years. And outside was this 1949 Silver Wraith, which only when I got into it, I discovered it had no brakes in it. None at all. So I drove it down to Jack Barclay's, all down the Earl's Court Road, with no brakes on, slithering. How do you change gear? And I was going, sorry, like this, trying to change the gear, and it would just shunt gently into other cars in front. And the doors opened that way, so they flew open and hit cyclists. Anyway, people jumped out of their cars to help me, to push, to shove, men all, car, they loved the car. Anyway, I had it for about 3 years, and then the block cracked. Men know what that means.
Sad end.
Yeah.
And do you like driving fast? Because your mother said any speed over 30 miles an hour was dangerously reckless.
I think she'd been driven badly by some mad tearaway in her youth. She loathed fast driving. But 30 miles an hour was about the top speed for her. I noticed, unless she was driving, in which case it was 70. But anyway, anybody under that. But I don't really like it. But I did Top Gear, for which I still hold the record for being the fastest grandmother. And the Stig took me around. And, I'm obsessed by that programme because I think it's fascinating. I think cars are fascinating. I know they use up petrol and all that sort of stuff, but, God, the beauty of a car going fast and the beauty of a man like the Stig who can really drive. And he took me around 2 or 3 times. The first time he drove, the second time he came with me and I drove, and the third time he came with me telling me where I'd gone wrong and must be more courageous and when to just drive through a corner. I said, I want to brake. He said, foot down hard on the accelerator, accelerate through this corner. And I was going, no. And then he got out of the car and I went, Stig, don't leave me. Anyway, I had to do it on my own. And I was getting faster and faster. He said I could have done it quicker, but I'd lost my nerve by then, I didn't want to drive that fast. It was very exciting.
Didn't he also famously say that of all the celebrities he'd ever met, you shocked him the most because of your language? So it was like the Queen swearing, you just don't expect it.
It was very frightening. It was very frightening.
Charleston was a place that the Bloomsbury Group escaped from their lives to. And as you're travelling, you seem to be accompanied now by sort of film crews. How do you escape? Where do you escape to?
We've got a cottage in Scotland. Stephen and I went to stay with some friends who live in Dumfriesshire. And for some reason, because both of us have been to different bits of Scotland, the Highlands, the islands, the this, the, you know, how you get a bit grand about Scotland. You go, oh, we're going, and always the more remote the island or the stranger or the more jagged the cliff or the colder the castle, you kind of go, oh, that's Scotland for you. So the borders, I thought, what can be in the borders? We went to stay with these friends, and it's near the southern uplands, which is the most spectacular. It's like the Lake District, only it's in a bit of Scotland, which is also called Undiscovered Scotland. So unfortunately, I've told you about it now. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Good. All the little lanes go up and end. They don't go anywhere. So you can't do anything there except live there. And we saw on a hill a completely ruined cottage. I went, what's that? And they said, no, it's just a ruin, alas. Now, it was on the Duke of Buccleuch's land. So, speeding up the story, I said we'd like this. And the Duke said, you can't live there. We can give you a factor's house. I said, we must have that place. I'd walked up to it in the snow, with the light snow coming down. And as I pushed open the door, it had no windows, no floors, it had no water, no electricity, no road. It had been empty for 50 years. 2 barn owls flew out past me like this. And as I went in on that freezing day with the wind blowing, I was completely warm. And I thought, oh, we live here. So we took it and made it ours. And from it you can see nothing, but you can hear curlews and buzzards, hares. We've planted some trees, only the natural trees, which would already be there. So we've got ash and oak and willow. We've got rowan and everything you can imagine, big beech tree. And the cuckoos sing all day in the summer in the valleys below. And we took some water off the hills, the sweetest water. If you bottled it, you could sell it like this. I don't think we should drink bottled water. Okay, anyway, or rather, no, a bottle is good, but I think we should save these bottles and fill them up from the tap, okay?
We did that. Before we move on to questions from the audience, I just wanted to cover a rather more serious and profound territory by asking you about one of the key relationships in your life, which is your relationship with your hair. Because you said, my hair has governed a large part of my life. My hair will dance on my grave. Do you want to... It's
hopeless. I mean, the truth is I've got hopeless hair. When I was little and lived in Malaya as a child, Eleni and I, my sister and I, had ruler straight, long hair. We were like little Palomino ponies. We were dark brown and our hair was very, very whitey blonde. And all we had every day was had it plaited into 2 plaits to go to school. By the time we'd walked back from school, from the army school in HQ Malaya, it was soaked through with sweat. And so you rinsed it out. You didn't wash it every day. You rinsed it, let it dry, and that was hair. When I came back to England and we went to boarding school and I was 8, Mummy realised that you couldn't really manage long plaits if you were 8. Anyway, it was her idea then. Darling, it'd be such fun, cut it all off. As the scissors went rasp, I thought, oh, I think something's going to go wrong here. My sister's hair remained heavy, thick, glossy. Her face remained spot-free. Her figure was immaculate. I turned into a sort of huge gorilla. I had a mat of stuff. You know when you clean out the Hoover bags? That's what my hair was like. And I had spots, and I suddenly grew very, very tall. I had an operation to take out my appendix when I was 12. I went in 2 inches short of my sister and came out an inch taller after 6 days. I was revolting. So then my revolting hair on top of this spotty person who wanted to be Vivian Lee, I mean, it was all very bad luck. So I blamed it on my hair. And nowadays, you can dye your hair, you've got tongs, you've got rollers, you've got smooth hairdressers, you've got all kinds of good things. But in those days, it was pretty slim pickings. Can people remember slim pickings hair days? And do you remember if you went into a hairdresser, they would have setting lotion which smelled of eggs, and they'd have rather small rollers, and you go, can we not have the, put them in. And they put in these tiny rollers, and you'd come out with a bubble, look like a sheep. Awful! I've spent most of my life looking revolting, which is why I still wear so much makeup. I take makeup with me wherever I go. Actually, that's from my grandmother, because when she went on immensely long, distant journeys with my diplomat grandfather in Tibet and Sikkim and Bhutan, she always changed for dinner. She always wore nail varnish, and she put on her makeup, even in camp.
I think we're going to move to questions from the audience now. Now, we've got 2 roving microphones around. If you can sort of put your hand up if you want to ask a question, and then when the microphone reaches you, if you can actually stand up and then we can see you. So, have we got a first question?
Oh, please ask me something.
So
oh,
there's
look.
a gentleman there, been waiting all his life to ask
No,
you
he's
something.
not. He's not. We were married briefly. He's forgotten.
During your career, have you turned down many roles or had serious reservations before taking up a particular job?
It sounds grand, but I've turned down more parts than you could shake a stick at and still do. I mean, it would be wrong to say 9 out of 10. It would be nearer to say 29 out of 30 I turned down. Because a lot of the writing just isn't good enough. A lot of it is sort of sparked off by the part you did before. So after Patsy, or when Patsy came out, I got tons and tons of old batty drunk women, but not written at all well, just drunk old batty women. And I thought, no, I don't want to do that. And after the Avengers, I was given lots and lots of... They wrote shows for me, which I didn't do, and other people did do, so I won't say those, because that sounds a bit sort of snooty. Cat's eyes. And I said I didn't want to do it, so you've forgotten it, because I wasn't in it. Mm-hmm. No, anyway, lots and lots of parts, and other parts which you want like mad, and you don't get, burn into your soul forever, and you think, I could have done that better. But I've one lovely story about Glenn Close. I was offered, Bruce Beresford, great Australian director, wanted to do a film about women. It wasn't Changi Jail, but it was somewhere where the women had made an orchestra out of their own voices. She taught them all how to sing Beethoven's Fifth or something like that. And they sang the parts of the cellos and the flutes and the fiddles and the things like this. They sang the parts. And she conducted them. Now, I'm married to a conductor, and this woman was English in this jail. And Bruce Beresford asked me to do it, and I went, there is a God and I live in paradise. So this is perfect, because Stevie can teach me how to do all the conducting, and we'll get it right. And then Bruce rang me 6 weeks later and said, I'm so sorry, they want a star, and we're going to go with Glenn Close. So they went with Glenn Close, but the film came out and she was a huge success, and she, being Glenn Close, musically is untouchable and has got a wonderful English accent, did it perfectly. She went on the morning show with Jenny Murray, Woman's Hour. She went on Woman's Hour with Jenny Murray. And Jenny said, your accent is absolutely beautiful. And I was ironing in the kitchen, not because I'm sad, but because I was ironing. I was just ironing in the kitchen. And there alone, Glenn Close said, I'm so pleased. I took a copy of the voice of Joanna Lumley and had her voice on tape, and I copied her voice. And I went, yes! Yes! Isn't that fantastic? And since then, I've been on a play in Broadway, and Glenn Close came to see me in my dressing room. So life has a very odd way of making things better than the original. I'd have been bloody awful in the film, you know.
Another question, please.
That was it. Oh, no, lovely.
And then after that, someone in the corner there as well.
Hi there. Hello. Do you have any views on today's politicians?
We were talking about this at lunch, funnily enough, about the whole notion of politics and how all parties are now very, very close to the centre. It's very, very difficult to be a politician now. For a start, we have derided them for so long. We don't pay them nearly as much money as they can get in the private sector. We treat them with contempt. The apathy amongst voters is immense. So they're sort of singing... It's a bit of a poisoned chalice, I think. I'm so old that I joined the hands of Nick Clegg and David Cameron in our Gurkha Justice campaign, and I led them triumphantly from the House of Commons out onto the Westminster Green to greet the Gurkhas and to say to the world, you know, these two chaps have overturned the, Parliament. So that was pretty extraordinary too. And I realised they were both younger than my son. So I was able to say, for the first and only time in my life, I said, Nick, you're going to be talking first. I'll introduce you, Nick. You talk. David, do you mind talking second? No, I didn't think you would. You talk second. But I think it's a difficult world, and I don't know how we manage to bring youth back. I suspect we all go and vote. But where I live in Stockwell, it's of a complete indifference. People feel that it will go on and it'll be awful. And there's a very lazy way of saying, oh, all politicians are the same and they're all bloody awful. Well, they're not, and we ought to help them. But I think we ought to help them by trimming their numbers, paying them more. I think it's like school teachers, actually, only we should double their numbers, halve the size of the classes, and pay them much more. Get people out of the private sector and get them into the classrooms. We need very, very good teaching. And we need very, very good politicians. So we've got to bribe them back in a way, I think. What do you think? No, you can't. You haven't got a microphone. We'll talk about that later.
So there's a question over, yes, in the corner there.
Yes, you were born in India, and of course your work with the Gurkhas is famous and loved by us all. But how has your experience in India, and then you talked about Malaya, echoed through your life?
Is it that in our house we had Buddhas, so other religions appeared? Muezzin's called in Malaya, the Hindu faith, and I'm booming slightly, the Hindu faith was there, Buddhism, the whole notion of other relations, other coloured people, other textured, different-looking, height, weight-faced people were part of our lives. So we knew at a very early age that, and also I didn't belong anywhere, I didn't come from anywhere, I don't have a home, thank God. It's London now because I chose it, but I've never come from somewhere. I don't come from a part of England because my parents don't and their parents didn't. So we don't come from anywhere. And so the whole notion of foreigners being unwelcome, I find very shocking, particularly as I've had the luck to travel a great deal, and the welcomes that I've received in the poorest homes, the most extraordinary and unreachable places, the extraordinary hospitality which this country used to offer people has been sort of washed over, and we're resentful. So I don't know what border controls should be, but I think wouldn't it be thrilling? I want to try roads without any marks on, no bus lanes, no lines, nothing, and borders without any passports. It'd be shocking for a little bit, and then it'll settle down.
We've got a question down here, second row, and then some questions over here as well.
Don't let me go on. Honestly, I do go on. You could be here till midnight. Please stop me.
Hi. Joanna, if you're...
Juliet, you have to stand up.
Oh, no, sorry.
Even though it's yours, darling, even though the whole festival, even though we're only here because of you.
I wondered, if your granddaughters were to ask you what is the most important quality in a human being, what would you tell them?
I would pass on... Well, now, I was at the Office of Tibet the other day, and Tubton Samdup, who's His Holiness's representative in England, said, have you read this? And passed a book over to me. And it was called Beyond Religion, and it was written by the Dalai Lama, who says that we have actually reached the stage where we ought to be beyond religion because we don't need these complicated, different series of tribal necessities to do the same thing, which is simply to be kind. And so in my life, if I had to say anything to Alice and Emily that was to endure, it was simply to be kind to people. If you are kind, if kindliness informs everything you do, you can't go far wrong. And it's not too difficult to remember. Don't you think?
The gentleman over the back. Yeah.
Hi there. I remember you very fondly in a television programme called A Very English Marriage with Tom Courtenay and Albert Finney. I was just wondering, that looked like great fun, by the way. But I was wondering if you could tell us who it was you most enjoyed working with in your years in acting.
Well, how sweet of you to say that. It was one of the things I'm most proud of. For a start, Tom Courtenay was in the Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner when I was just leaving school, and Albert Finney was Tom Jones, which I went to see, 3 times, I think, when you could sit through in cinemas when it just shows on a loop around and around and around. And to work with both of them was unbelievable. And I saw Tom 2 nights ago at this big shenanigans at the Royal Academy. Did you see that when we all went to meet the Queen? Yes! Look, Courtenay was there looking in terribly dapper shape. He's terribly attractive, ladies. I promise you, Courtenay would be after you like a shot. He's a ladies' man, you'd never think it. Since I told you about Christopher Lee, I've played Christopher Lee's wife. Since I told you about James Villas, to whom I said, yes, Mr. Robertson, and got my part, I've played James Villas' wife as Amanda in Private Lives. Patrick Macnee, the person who I couldn't afford a television set, so we never watched Diana Rigg being in the Avengers because we were too poor as flat-sharing people in Earl's Court. Suddenly at Pat McNean, I'm in there. So I've been catching up with extraordinary people I've worked with. Some of the people I've worked with are actors who will not be familiar to you, but are just brilliantly good fun and kindly and reliable. I've just come from doing The Lion in Winter in the Haymarket with Robert Lindsay. Well, for goodness sake. You know, and people go, Wolfie Smith, and you go, yeah, but did you know he was also? And then you start going through and through and through. He was Henry II in Beckett, but he was also Onassis. He can do anything, song, dance, anything. Brilliant, brilliant boys who have great, great favourites like this. Jennifer Saunders. I think I've liked working with her as much as anything else. Unfortunately, when we start laughing, there was a scene we had to do when Patsy and Adina got very old, and we had to have our faces made of rubber, and we had our hands made of rubber, and we had little dowager hump things. We had little saggy sand bosoms, and our hands were made of claws. And clearly Patsy. I said, "What's happened to Patsy?" And Jennifer said, "She's gaga." And I went, "Oh." This was just before we set off. Well, we'd started crying before the thing, and the director was very angry with us because we didn't have much. We were outside, and he said, "Come on, just get on with it, get on with it." Bob Spears, the best director we ever had, he said, "Just get on, stop it, stop laughing, get on, do this." And we had to walk along through a garden where Patsy, drooling away in her pop socks, with her humpy things like this, goes along, sniffs, suddenly loves nature, sniffs a flower, and gets a bee up her nose. And sneezes the bee out, because of course she's got no nostrils, so it's all gone from coke, it's all gone away there. She sneezes or coughs the bee out, and her pants fall off. Well, we just cried and cried, and the director was angry, and we had to go home and take our makeup off, but it was one of the most blissful things. And Jennifer has said aloud on the Graham Norton show or something that she's going to write the film, which we've been talking about for 20 years, so maybe we'll do that, and then Paradise shall come again.
We've got two more questions. Time for two questions. There's one there. Is there one
Thank you.
over here at all?
Hello, Joanna. Are you still a vegetarian? Because when I met you 30 years ago, I'd just become one, and you were one.
Yes.
Inspired me.
I've been a vegetarian for a long time now, and so this is this is the last instruction you're allowed to pass on.
Good.
Is that you don't look. I'm fine. Do you see? I'm fine, and I haven't eaten meat and fish for 35 years or whatever it is. So I'm clearly fine. It's not necessarily commendable. I'm just saying, look, you aren't ill or dead or anemic or can't cut it or forget things. You don't. You're fine. Most of the world is vegetarian. So all this finger-wagging, do be careful when people go, but where will you get your protein? You need a piece of liver inside you. You obviously don't. So also, if you're a bit skint, it's much cheaper to eat vegetables. You can make a vegetable soup. You can actually go around and pick bits up off the stall, the floors of a market. And in Covent Garden, because I'm old enough to remember it when Covent Garden had boys selling fruit and vegetables and flowers there, they used to see the nuns coming with their baskets from the convents in the middle of Covent Garden. And they go, "There you are, darling. Oh, a whole cauliflower gone down. There you are, sister. Nice one." That's sweet. They used to chuck stuff on the ground for the nuns. It was really nice.
And one final question. We've got... No?
No, they didn't want to say any more. That was it. That was
it.
a vegetable answer.
That was a vegetable answer. Well, we're going to end with a vegetable.
Oh,
We're going
you
to...
were so lovely, Colin.
What's that? Yeah, there is a hand. The final question. We can't end on a cauliflower.
No, we can't end on a cauliflower.
Hi there. I always remember your fabulous haircut when you were Purdey, and I remember all my friends getting it. Were you responsible for that, or was that sort of Vidal coming in and insisting, or the show, or how did that happen?
When I got the part of Georgie in the New Avengers, I said, oh, but there was a centaur at the time called Georgie. Do you remember that? No, Charlie, and the girl swung along her bag and walked around. I said, I can't be called Charlie because there's that stuff, and they'll think this would. And I said, well, I'm going to call myself Purdey, name a very good shotgun. They went, all right. And I said, I've also got to get my hair cut and dyed blonde because I didn't think this tough little policewoman would mess about with long hair. And they said, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that. There's never been a heroine with short hair. It's not possible. So sorry. Next, please. And I said, no, you misunderstand me. I am a clairvoyant. I am called Purdey with short hair. What's the problem? And they said, all right. And I was skint, remember, at this time. They said, if we don't like it, you will have a wig made, which you will have to maintain throughout the shoot, and it will have to be made of European hair, and it'll cost you a fortune. So I said, I'm going to go off and have my hair cut. Does anybody hear of a hairdresser called John Frieda? Well, he was a junior at Leonard's, and holding the Kirby grips for him was a boy with red hair called Nicky Clark. And in 4 hours, because I kept saying to John Frieda, I want it to look like a prep school boy. I want it to be a fringe and cut into the back of the neck. It took forever. I said, I don't want it to come down here. It's got to go past the ears to there. I'd had this vision. I said, it's got to look like this. So we battled on. And he made it look pretty good. And at home, I thought, not quite short enough here. So as ever, and I always do, I cut a bit more off there. And we straightened it and dyed it on the same day. Oh, your hair will fall out. I went, no, it won't. It's not hair, darling. It comes out of a Hoover bag. It looked sensational, and they simply loved it. It got a bit sort of bigger, stranger, and people would have it like a collapsed pancake over their heads. And then people said, oh, isn't that Purdey cut ugly? But actually, it became mandatory in Holland, because I went there, and there wasn't a person without it. So it was a huge success. So for all that my life has been dreadful, I've been defined by 2 haircuts, the Purdey cut and the Patsy beehive. Isn't it funny how life goes around?
Thank you. Joanna Lumley, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.